Hello, let's talk about global net liquidity, which is represented on this chart here. But before we do, let's switch back to the regular net liquidity formula right here. Um, by now, many of you are familiar with this famous formula, Fed balance sheet minus RRP minus TGA. So the idea behind, and this is very U.S. centric because it's the U.S. Federal Reserve balance sheet and the U.S. Reverse repo facility and the Treasury General account of the United States Treasury. So the idea behind global net liquidity would be to generalize this as much as possible to foreign nations. Ideally, we'd get the same three components for some of the larger nations out there. So here's a description of the formula we're using for global net liquidity in this case, or this version of it. We've got the Fed balance sheet plus the Japan central bank balance sheet, the China balance sheet, the ECB balance sheet, and then we also throw in US RRP and the US TGA. So as you can see, we're not including foreign versions of the RRP and TGA. We can only work really with what we're given on TradingView. And the exact formula that I've put into TradingView is shown here. I've also posted on my Twitter. So the nice thing about this formula, there's a lot of nice things about it, but one is that it just summarizes so much information in one chart. Instead of having to keep track of the individual balance sheets, which we can do right here in this watch list I have, we can go and take a look at the ECB balance sheet, the one for Japan. I'll zoom in a little bit there. The one for China. Um, Here's the one for the UK. I don't include it in the global net liquidity formula because limitations of TradingView insofar as how many symbols can be included in a single formula. Oh, and by the way, there actually is this chart available on TradingView. Some of you might say there is an RRP for China, and so this chart is China liquidity injections via reverse repo. It's a very interesting chart. The symbol's right there, CNLIVRR. But it's not quite the same thing as the US reverse repo chart. Here it actually gives us like the total amount at any given time that is in there. We can see it's trended upwards drastically starting around 2021, April, June, and it's gone up since then. Whereas if you look at the chart for the liquidity injections via reverse repo, it's not like cumulative. It just shows how much it went up on a particular day. And actually, it's for this one you can switch it to columns and you get a more precise picture. So on any one of these days you can see how much was injected. The problem is that these expire. So if you go to the China central bank website, it'll show here like on the 24th, 470 was injected. So that was yesterday. But then it also say it'll expire like maybe 7 days or 14 days later. So that's kind of why we can't easily include this one in the global net liquidity chart. But as I mentioned before, instead of jumping around to each of the balance sheets, this number one, it includes them all. Number two, the foreign uh, country balance sheets that we're including here, we're converting them to USD. And right here you can see, JPN assets times JPY USD here, the China balance sheet multiplied times CNY USD, and then the ECB assets multiplied times EUR USD. So we're converting everything to US dollars, and as a result, implicitly in this formula is the DXY, the Dixie, which of course is something that's many people consider, very important to track on a daily basis. So that's the nice thing about this chart is since the Dixie's implicit in it, we get that information in here as well. So we're getting, for the central banks, we're getting, as they say, the dollar wrecking ball is represented here, and then of course, each of the foreign currencies that we're tracking here, JPY, CNY, and EUR, each of those threes are also represented in this formula. So it's just so, like as I say, it's just so much information that's densely packed into here. It's just a really nice chart to keep an eye on a daily basis, and it's throughout the day really. There is a couple of downsides to consider when using this chart, and that's the different rates at which some of these symbols are updated. WALCL, the U.S. Federal Reserve balance sheet, that's updated on a weekly basis. So that's pretty good. Same thing with ECB. So if we zoom in, if we switch over to WALCL, go to the line, we'll zoom in here. You can see, just looking at some of these, 22nd, the 15th, the 8th, etc. Similar for, as I mentioned, ECB. You're going to see these more or less every week. Whereas JPN assets is updated only monthly. So if we look at, like, we come to the latest data point here, that's for January 1st. We go to the one before that, it's December 1st. So it's not weekly, it's only monthly, and it's really, it kind of lags. Like there we have January 1st data point. We're now February 25th. So we still don't have, well, presumably, February will show up by the time the month's over. So that's just something to keep in mind. Obviously, if you see in the news, they've been doing a lot of apparently a lot of stimulus stuff, and so we're not seeing those updates, and we won't see them until the month is up. So that's just something to keep in mind, is you're not getting these weekly updates for Japan, and same thing for China. And it's a little bit worse for China because if you zoom in for the central bank balance sheet for China, if you look at the most recent data point right here, that's actually, so for Japan, at least it was January 1st. For China, it's December 1st. So it really lags and it's monthly. But yeah, I mean, it takes a while to get an update from them. So that one's even worse because I'm sorry, I misspoke when I said it's been in the news that, well, I guess both Japan and China have been doing a lot of things as far as stimulus go, but especially China. That's the one I meant to say. So yeah, on the chart here, we're only getting up to December, but it's the chart isn't reflecting everything they've done since then. So that's just something to keep in mind when you are using the global net liquidity chart. Let me switch over to the candle and the daily. We'll zoom out here. So yeah, it's a pretty good chart to see what's gone on historically, and even what's going on now, in the sense that you are getting updates for the dollar, the foreign currencies represented here, and then at least for uh, the Federal Reserve balance sheet and the ECB balance sheet, you are getting those on a weekly basis. The only lagging ones are, as I mentioned, Japan and China. So you might want to keep up with those in the news and just kind of mentally correct on those. And then, of course, maybe consider lobbying TradingView to see if they can get some more up to date or more frequently updated streams on those. Some folks might consider it to be a little bit odd to do like TA on a chart like this, but since the foreign currencies are represented, you might want to consider that. For example, I think it's really interesting that almost for, let's see, what was it, about 100 and over 180 days, it just kind of leveled off right here. Um, so that was an interesting level to note. Um, Same thing right here where we just peaked in mid-January, and we've been on a kind of a downtrend since then. That appears to the Dixie has a lot to do with this downtrend here because DXY has been pumping. Then of course we had the low here, end of September, starting in October, and the market more or less rallied since then. So some of you may not be aware of this, but when you enter in a formula into TradingView, it only allows up to 10 symbols, at least as of this time. And if you look at this formula, we've got 9 symbols. If you go in and count them right here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So, it would have been nice to include the the Great Britain, the UK central bank in here, but if we added in that symbol plus the currency conversion, that would bump up the symbols to 11. So that's why we don't include that here and really only limit it to 4 central banks. Now, some of you may be aware that there is an indicator that I've set up on TradingView called Global Net Liquidity. And if you just search for that, here in the indicators, Global Net Liquidity, you'll see right there show up, and a couple of variations for specifically for overlaying SPX and Dow Jones Global. But by default, when you add it, it just pops up in a different window here, or at least the Global Net Liquidity does. So what I will do is can maximize it. Now this indicator actually does include the UK central bank, and you can see that for yourself if you got the indicator loaded. And this is just some information for some of y'all who are kind of new to TradingView and indicators. If you go up to where the name of the indicator and you click the curly braces, it'll show you the source code, and it's not that complex. I mean, the entire indicator is 18 lines long. That's including some comments above. Um, but right here, you can see the different symbols we're loading, right? WALCL, it's the Federal Reserve, JPN Assets, China, and Bank of England, and ECB. So right there, you can see that we are in fact loading or representing 5 central banks in this indicator, as opposed to just the 4 in the formula. Because in an indicator, we're not limited. We're not entering a single formula, to draw. We're kind of computing it and building it up slowly through here, so we can really bring in more. We're not limited by that 10 symbol limit in the formulas. And the other I guess benefit to entering the formula indirectly instead of going the indicator route is when you enter in the formula, TradingView treats it as its own kind of a chart, and you can, annotate it, do some TA on it, draw lines or whatever. Whereas with the indicator, it's meant to overlay, and so like if you draw lines here, they're not really persistent. So that's kind of the downside to using the indicator version. Okay, if you have any comments, questions, or suggestions, let me know. And thank you for watching. Bye.